What is up, beautiful people? My name is Bobby Rollin. Today we are going to be talking about flying at night, also known as night flying. That's right, there's a couple of things that is not the same as flying during the day, so we're going to be going over some of the similarities, some of the differences, and most importantly, a basic overview of what you need to know. This is not a substitute for flight training, so make sure before you go flying at night, you always check in with your instructor and you're following the material prescribed by your instructor at your school. Alright, so first we got to talk about the rules of night flying. As you may expect, there are a different set of rules of flying at night compared to there are during the day. So let's talk about our aircraft first. So I'm hoping at this point, by the time we're night flying, we're familiar with A-tomato flames. That is our required equipment for flying during the day. In addition to A-tomato flames, in order to fly at night, you need to have flaps. What are flaps? You need to have fuses, a landing light, anti-collision lights, position lights, and source of power. You need to have your flaps in order to go flying. Pun intended. If any of these pieces of equipment are inoperative, you are not allowed to do your flight. You have to have your flaps and as well as any other equipment required by your aircraft manufacturer for night flying. So always refer to your POH if you have specific questions. The other thing you need to be aware of is the rules are different for you, Mr. or Mrs. Pilot. You need to have night currency in order to take passengers up. If you want to go flying by yourself, you are, as long as you have a private pilot's license, you are legally allowed to do that. You can do that anytime as long as your pilot's license and all your medical and documents are all good. However, if you want to take your mom and dad up, your sister, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whoever, you need to have at least 3 takeoffs and landings to a full stop within the preceding 90 days to act as a PIC with passengers. And it must be in the same category and class of aircraft. So what does that really mean? It's pretty straightforward. You have to land 3 times, 3 landings and takeoffs within preceding 90 days of your night flight with passengers in order to go flying that day. If you do not have that, you are not current and you are not legal to go flying that day. That being said, just because you have your currency doesn't mean you're proficient at it. Your skills as a night pilot align with your goals as a night pilot, and make sure you're not accepting any unnecessary risk. So if you're unsure, if you're having second thoughts, second doubts, do not do the flight. Go up with an instructor, build that confidence, get your skills up, and then go take your friends up on a flight. Currency versus proficiency. This is something that we preach throughout all stages of flying. So make sure you follow that. So you might be saying to yourself, wait, Bobby, when is nighttime? For me, nighttime is 4 p.m. For me, nighttime is 9 p.m. How do I tell, what is nighttime? How do I know when I can log my time? How do I know when I can log my landings? Great question. You're not the first person to have this question. So let's break it down. So you can log your takeoffs and landings 1 hour after sunset or 1 hour before sunrise. That's when you're legally allowed to log takeoffs and landings. Past sunset and before sunrise, you must have your flaps and be night current and have all of your anti-collision lights on and so forth for your flight. So if you're flying with your friends and it hits sunset, you have to have all your flaps, your lights, and you must be night current. That being said, you're not allowed to log nighttime until civil twilight ends. Bobby, what is civil twilight? Civil twilight is different every single day. It's usually a time period between 20 and 40 minutes after sunset or before sunrise. And that period is known as civil twilight. It's different every single day. So if you want to look up civil twilight for your day, you can go look it up before your night flight and say, okay, at this exact time, this is civil twilight's over. That being said, I always play it safe and don't start logging nighttime until 40 minutes after sunset for every flight, just as a universal rule to make sure I'm compliant with this rule and regulation. All right, let's talk about the physiological effects of flying at night. Your body. Biggest ones to know are your eyes. Your eyes are made up of or use these things called rods and cones. At night, rods are what are used to help see at night. As we can see here by our diagram that we got from our lovely PHAC, the rods that we use to fly at night don't have the best vision when you look directly at it. In fact, you might have experienced this thing known as the night blind spot. That happens when you stare directly at an object directly in front of you at nighttime. You might not actually be able to see that object very well. It might be obscured or totally blind. And so we want to be aware of our night blind spot and make sure that we're using our peripheral vision to scan and make sure we're seeing everything and avoiding everything and doing what we intend to do. We want to be aware of that night blind spot and the limitation of the rods in our eyes. Another thing I hope you would be aware of at this point in your life if you're doing flight training is dark adaptation. Your eyes take a while to adapt to the light, to nighttime, up to 30 minutes. And so we want to be aware of that as pilot. Last thing I want to talk about is hypoxia. So at nighttime, it's harder to see things. Your eyes are working harder to see what's going on. You will experience hypoxia quicker at night because your eyes use more oxygen at night to be able to see. So it's recommended by the FAA that you use supplemental oxygen on flights over 6,000 feet MSL. All right, what personal equipment will you need for night flying? Great question. Two biggest ones, and everybody's different. You're going to want a red headlight so you can be able to see your analog instruments. You're flying a clapped out Cessna 172 or a Piper Warrior or whatever, an Archer. They're not going to have great avionics in it usually. And so you want to have the red light. The red light will help you see. The other thing you want to have is a regular flashlight. You want to have the regular flashlight so you can do your pre-flight inspection around the plane. All right, let's talk about night illusions. So at night, you will experience some visual illusions that you might not experience during the day. First one I want to talk about is the black hole illusion. So the black hole illusion happens when pilots are on approach to a runway that is just surrounded by a giant black area. So think a runway in the middle of like a cornfield or something. That runway will just look like it's on an island. It's in a black hole, as some might say. And so because of this, the runway will appear closer than it actually is, causing you to round out higher than you should. So you want to be aware of this and make sure you're following your PAPIs and VASTIs all the way in and you're making a stable approach to land, even if you feel like you're closer than you actually are. Next one we want to talk about is the autokinesis illusion. So at nighttime, there's going to be lights. There might be a cell phone tower or something along those lines. You're flying along, boo-doo-doo, and you see this cell phone tower light and you just stare at it. If you stare at it, it'll look like that it's moving, when in actuality it's staying still. That's why we want to maintain our scan, so we're not getting ourselves confused by staring at lights, thinking that they're moving when they're actually not. This is called the autokinesis illusion. Next one to talk about is our false horizon illusion. Guess what? At night, you can't see the horizon because it's all black. Because of this, our mind is going to play tricks on us. It's going to see a highway that's going in front of us as the horizon, or it's going to see the ocean or something like that as the horizon, and you're going to accidentally line yourself up with that instead of the actual horizon. When you do this, you want to double check that you're aligned with the horizon by looking at your attitude indicator. You might say to yourself, wow, I'm flying along the horizon. Look at me. I'm doing great. But then you look at your attitude indicator, you're doing your instrument scan, and you're saying, oh my God, I'm in a 6-degree bank to the right. Or whatever the case may be, I need to correct that. That is the false horizon illusion. Trust your instruments. Do not always trust what you see outside because it could be playing a trick on you. All right, pre-flight. So when we pre-flight a night flight, we want to do a really thorough briefing. We want to make sure our flight is within our personal minimum. So we usually start with the weather, of course, just like any other flight, NOTAMs, etc. We're checking NW craft, making sure everything looks good. There's one part of weather for night flying that a lot of people might not think about, especially if it's your first couple of times flying at night. So everybody knows to check your winds, check your, for moisture, rain, snow, etc. But a lot of times pilots, especially newer pilots, forget to check cloud levels. If there are clouds in the area, you're not going to see them as well at nighttime because it's dark and the clouds blend in really well. So you want to check and make sure there's no clouds. You don't want to put yourself in a situation, especially as a younger pilot, where you're flying through clouds at nighttime. You're going to get disoriented and you're going to create a hazard. So really double check clouds and make sure you're giving yourself, if there are clouds at night, you're giving yourself a really healthy, safe distance. Like obviously too, we're also checking for fog, rain, moisture, any sort of weather hazard that is abnormal. We want to make sure that it's within our proficiency as a pilot. So we're not doing anything crazy. We're not accepting any unnecessary risks. So we're not doing gusting 30 flight with rain and it's nighttime and it's to an airport we've never been to. All these different things. We're keeping it simple for ourselves. We want to maintain our personal minimums, charts, and EFB. So at this point, I hope you're familiar with your VFR sectional. If you have it with you, you can take a look at it. But basically, your VFR sectional gives you a lot of good information to help you at your night flight. So take a look at what we got here to the right. I pulled up Minneapolis, St. Paul, my local area. As you can see, the city area is highlighted yellow on the map there. That's telling us where there's most likely going to be a lot of city lights. And so when I'm planning my flight, let's say Minneapolis International here to the center to somewhere like Red Wing, Minnesota, I know, okay, there's going to be city lights, oops, no city lights, a little bit of city lights, no city lights, no city lights, oops, city lights again, I'm at Red Wing. It gives us extra clues for our flight. And we're doing this pre-flight so we have an idea of what to expect on our flight. So when we get up in the air and we're saying, oh, it's been 10 minutes since I've seen lights, we've already expected that. That's the way it should be. It will also give us clues when we're coming in to approach and land, stuff like that. We're also taking a look at our sectional to see if our airport has a rotating beacon, if it is pilot-controlled lights, if it's towered versus non-towered. We're getting all this information so we can adequately prepare for our flight. When we're doing our pre-flight inspection at night, we want to be extra thorough. We want to use our flashlight. We want to check everything. We want to do it the same as we do during the day, but make sure we're compensating for the fact that we can't see as well as night. So make sure you're thorough. I'd rather you be slow and thorough than fast and miss something. And before we start our engine pre-flight at nighttime, you are required to start your anti-collision lights before that flight. It's a legal requirement. You have to turn on those anti-collision lights before you start your engine at night. All right, let's talk about the taxi phase of flight. So, as you may expect, taxiing at night, you don't have the same visual references as you do during the day. So we want to increase our situational awareness, keep our head on a swivel. We want to make sure our airport diagram is up. We're aware of hotspots, and we're making sure that if we're, let's say, at a towered airport, we're writing down our taxi instructions and verifying we are where we're supposed to be, not just visually, but also with our airport diagrams and other tools we have that enhance our situational awareness. We want to also increase our runway incursion awareness, because guess what? It's harder to see the runway at night. There's a lot of different taxi lights, as you can see here. We're not going to talk about them all. I want you to talk about that with your instructor during a one-on-one session, talking about different airports and stuff like that. They'll be able to talk about your particular airport, because not all airports have the same set of lights. Biggest things, like broad strokes, if you see blue lights, that means you're on a taxiway. If you see white, you're on a runway edge. It's easier to make mistakes at night while taxiing. All right, let's talk about our runway. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but each airport's runway is going to have different sets of lights. Some are going to be super basic, like some are just going to have runway end identifier lights, which are little white lights at the corner of each runway. Some might have like a lighting system like this, a full high-intensity runway lighting system here, where they have lights, they have rabbits that guide you in, they have the pappies, they got the center line light, they got everything. I hate to break it to you, I wish they were, but not all airports are going to be like this, so you want to familiarize yourself with your airport's runway before every flight, so there's no surprises there. Biggest ones, stay on your pappies and vassies. Don't land on a runway closed light. If you see runway closed, it'll be a big old X that's hopefully lit up at night. They'll say, hey, runway closed, don't go there. So if you see that X, go around every time. Plane, when we're in the middle of our flight, you're not going to have the same visual references that you do during the day. So you have to use extra situational awareness. And you want to be aware, too, also what tools are at your disposal. So when you're looking for an airport at night, it's going to be a lot harder than looking for an airport during the day. We want to be aware if the airport we're looking for has an airport beacon. If it does have an airport beacon, it's going to be alternating white and green. We also want to know, are we going to an airport that's towered or non-towered? If it's towered, you will have to request tower to get the lights intensity up. That might help you spot the runway. If it's non-towered, you have to use pilot-controlled lighting. So pilot-controlled lighting is when you get onto the CTAF frequency of that non-towered airport, and if you do 3 clicks, you'll get low-intensity lights, 5 for medium, and 7 for high. Last thing to talk about are the hazards of flying at nighttime. So night takeoffs and landings and approaches, You need to be aware of obstacles. You don't have the same ability to see as you do during the day, so obstacles are going to be way harder to see. You want to be aware of them and give yourself a really healthy distance. That includes mountains, buildings, towers, other aircraft. You need to have an extra awareness of these. Another thing to be aware of is emergency landings are more dangerous at night. That's because you really can't tell what's on the ground without the light. So you're taking a bigger risk doing an emergency landing on, let's say, a field. You could be landing in a field, or it could be a forest. It's really hard to say. Or let's say I know for a fact that's a field. Great. How do you know that there's no power lines near it? How do you know that there's not a big ditch that you're flying yourself directly into? Emergency landings are more dangerous at night. Distractions at night can lead you to make a mistake. When you're distracted, you're looking away, you're not focused on the flight, whatever the case may be. You can miss something. It could be a bird, it could be another plane, it could be lights going off. You could miss an entire airport. You could fly right past it if you're distracted. So you want to limit those distractions at night flights so you stay focused and you don't miss anything important. Collision hazards, obviously we sort of talked about this in terms of obstacles, but think about it in terms of other planes. You're not going to be able to see as well that giant super jumbo that's 2,000 feet above you, or another plane in the pattern as well, because it's nighttime. You can't see that Baron or whatever that's landing and taking off. So you want to be aware of these collision hazards and be aware of what our position lights mean. So if you see green, that means you're most likely to the right of that plane. If you see red, you're most likely to the left of that plane. And if you see white, you're behind that plane. So just be aware of your situational awareness. That's the really big key here. Keep it slow, keep it safe, stay within your proficiency, and you'll do fine at night flying. That's all I got for you guys today. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you got any concerns or questions, leave them down below.